the smell of smoke and sage hung heavy over Jordan Valley, Oregon, that autumn morning in 1878 when Victoria Thompson first laid eyes on Ethan Vance. And in that single moment, she understood what it meant to feel her carefully constructed world begin to crumble. She stood outside the general store with her basket of fabric and thread, watching as the stranger rode into town on a dusty paint horse that looked like it had traveled 1,000 miles. He was tall, lean in the way men who lived in the saddle always were, with sun-darkened skin and dark hair that curled slightly at his collar. But it was his eyes that caught her attention, the way they swept across the street with a quiet awareness that spoke of someone who had seen both the beauty and the brutality of the frontier. "Victoria," her mother's sharp voice cut through her thoughts. "We need to get home. Your father is expecting us for lunch, and we still need to discuss the final arrangements for your wedding." Victoria tore her gaze away from the cowboy and followed her mother to their buggy. In 3 weeks, she would marry Benjamin Caldwell, the son of the wealthiest rancher in the valley. It was a match that had been arranged since she was 16, a union that would join 2 of the most prominent families in the region. Benjamin was respectable, educated, and came from good stock, as her father liked to say. He was also cold, dismissive, and treated her like a prized mare he had purchased rather than a woman he intended to spend his life with. But that was how things were done. A woman did not marry for love. She married for security, for family, for the future of the ranch and the legacy her father had built from nothing. Victoria had accepted this truth years ago, had buried whatever girlish dreams she might have harbored about romance and passion. She was 20 years old, and she knew her duty. Still, as the buggy pulled away from town, she found herself looking back at the stranger one last time. He had dismounted and was speaking with the livery owner, his gestures easy and confident. Then, as if he felt her gaze, he turned and looked directly at her. Even from this distance, she felt the impact of that look like a physical thing, a jolt that went straight through her chest. She quickly turned forward, her cheeks burning and focused on the road ahead. The Thompson ranch sat in a valley, surrounded by rolling hills covered in sagebrush and juniper. Her father, Robert Thompson, had claimed this land 15 years ago when Victoria was just a child, and through hard work and determination, he had built it into one of the most successful cattle operations in eastern Oregon. The house was large and comfortable, built from timber hauled from the Blue Mountains, with a wide porch that overlooked the ranch yard. Victoria spent the afternoon helping her mother prepare for Sunday's church social, where the final wedding details would be announced to the community. She tried to focus on the tasks at hand, on hemming the new curtains her mother wanted to hang in the parlor, on polishing the silver that would be used to serve the guests. But her mind kept wandering back to that moment on the street, to the cowboy with the quiet eyes. "You seem distracted," her mother observed, looking up from the guest list she was reviewing. Margaret Thompson was a proper woman, refined in the way that spoke of an Eastern upbringing, though she had adapted well to frontier life. "Are you worried about the wedding?" "No, Mother," Victoria lied. "Just thinking about everything that needs to be done." Her mother smiled, but there was something knowing in her eyes. "Marriage is an adjustment, dear, but Benjamin will provide well for you. That is what matters." Victoria nodded and went back to her sewing, but inside, something rebelled against those words. Was that truly all that mattered, security and provision? What about kindness, companionship, love? She pushed the thoughts away. They were dangerous and served no purpose. Her fate was sealed, her future determined. In 3 weeks, she would become Mrs. Benjamin Caldwell, and that was the end of it. The next morning, Victoria rode into town with her father. He needed to order supplies from the general store, and she wanted to pick up the special lace her mother had ordered from San Francisco for her wedding dress. The day was clear and bright, the kind of perfect autumn day that made the high desert country seem almost gentle. They had just tied up their horses when Victoria saw him again. The cowboy was walking out of the hotel, a saddlebag slung over his shoulder. In the full light of day, she could see him more clearly. He was perhaps 25 or 26, with a strong jaw shadowed by a day's growth of beard and those same striking eyes that seemed to take in everything at once. "Ethan Vance," her father called out, surprising her. "I heard you were in town." The cowboy turned and smiled, transforming his serious face into something warm and approachable. "Mr. Thompson, it has been a while." Her father strode over and shook his hand vigorously. 3 years at least. Last I heard you were working a spread down in Nevada." "I was," Ethan replied. "But I got word that old Pete Crawford was looking to sell his place north of here. Thought I might come take a look, see if it is worth investing in." "The Crawford place?" Her father nodded thoughtfully. "Good land, though the house needs work. You thinking of settling down, maybe?" "I am getting too old to keep drifting." Ethan's gaze shifted to Victoria, who stood a few feet away, trying not to stare. "I do not believe I have had the pleasure of meeting your daughter, sir. Where are my manners?" Her father beckoned her forward. "Victoria, this is Ethan Vance. His father and I worked together years ago before you were born. Ethan, this is my daughter, Victoria, Miss Thompson." Ethan removed his hat and gave a slight bow. "It is a pleasure to meet you, Mr. Vance." She managed to keep her voice steady, though her heart was beating far too fast. Up close, she could see flecks of gold in his hazel eyes, could smell the clean scent of soap and leather. "Victoria is getting married in 3 weeks," her father announced proudly. "To Benjamin Caldwell, fine match." Something flickered across Ethan's face, too quick for her to identify. "Congratulations, Miss Thompson. I am sure you will be very happy." "Thank you," she murmured, though the words felt hollow in her mouth. "Ethan, you should come to Sunday's church social," her father said. "Good way to get reacquainted with folks if you are planning to stay in the area." "I appreciate the invitation, sir. I just might do that." They talked for a few more minutes about cattle prices and range conditions, but Victoria barely heard the conversation. She was too aware of Ethan's presence, of the way he stood with an easy confidence that Benjamin never seemed to possess, despite all his wealth and education. When the conversation ended and they parted ways, she found herself wishing she had said something more, something that would have given her an excuse to talk to him longer. "Good man, that Ethan," her father said as they walked toward the store. "His father was one of the best ranch hands I ever had, before he passed. Ethan learned everything about cattle and horses from him. Heard he saved up and bought his own small herd a few years back, been building it up ever since. That takes real determination and skill." Victoria nodded, filing away these details like precious gems. A man who had built something for himself through hard work and determination. It was not so different from what her own father had done, though Ethan was doing it alone, without the advantage of a family or established connections. Sunday arrived too quickly. Victoria dressed carefully in her best green dress, the one that brought out the color of her eyes. She told herself she was simply being respectful for church and the social afterward, that it had nothing to do with the possibility of seeing Ethan again. But as she pinned up her auburn hair, she took extra care to make sure it looked perfect. The church was full that morning, as it always was. Jordan Valley might be small, but the community was tight-knit, and Sunday service was as much about catching up with neighbors as it was about worship. Victoria sat in the Thompson family pew, between her mother and father, with Benjamin and his parents directly behind them. She could feel Benjamin's gaze on the back of her neck, possessive and presumptuous. The sermon was about duty and obedience, about accepting the path God had laid out for you without question. Victoria tried to pay attention, but her eyes kept wandering around the church, searching. And then, near the back, she saw him. Ethan sat alone in the last pew, his hat resting on his knee, his attention focused on the minister with the same quiet intensity she had noticed before. As if sensing her gaze, he looked up and their eyes met. He did not smile or look away. He simply held her gaze for a long moment. And in that look, she felt something pass between them, some acknowledgement of the strange pull that had existed from the first moment they saw each other. She forced herself to look away, to focus on the sermon, but her hands trembled slightly as she clutched her hymnal. After the service, the entire congregation moved to the open area behind the church, where tables had been set up for the social. The women had brought food, covered dishes of fried chicken and biscuits, pies and cakes, jars of preserved fruits and vegetables. It was a feast, and everyone moved through the line with plates, talking and laughing. Benjamin appeared at her elbow almost immediately. He was handsome in a polished way, with slicked-back blonde hair and pale blue eyes. At 24, he carried himself with the confidence of someone who had never known want or struggle. "Victoria," he said, taking her arm with a familiarity that made her skin prickle. "Come, let me fix you a plate." "I can manage on my own, thank you," she said, but he either did not hear or chose to ignore her, steering her toward the food tables. "Have you given any thought to where you would like to travel for our wedding trip?" he asked as he piled food onto a plate without asking what she wanted. "Father suggested San Francisco. We could stay at the Palace Hotel, see some shows." "That sounds lovely," she said automatically, though the thought of being alone with Benjamin in a hotel room made her stomach twist. "Of course, we cannot be gone too long," he continued. "I have responsibilities at the ranch, and you will need to learn how Mother runs the household. She has very specific ways of doing things." Victoria bit back a sharp retort. Of course she would be expected to conform to his mother's expectations, to become a proper Caldwell wife. Her own thoughts and preferences would matter very little. They had just sat down at one of the long tables when her father approached with Ethan in tow. "Benjamin, I want you to meet an old family friend," her father said. "This is Ethan Vance. He is thinking of buying the Crawford place." Benjamin stood and shook Ethan's hand with barely concealed condescension. "Vance, I have heard of you. You work as a ranch hand, is that right?" "I own my own herd," Ethan replied evenly, his tone polite but with an edge that suggested he had caught Benjamin's dismissive tone. "I have been building it up over the past few years." "How admirable," Benjamin said in a way that made it clear he thought it anything but. "I suppose we all have to start somewhere. My father built our ranch from the ground up as well, though that was many years ago." With the help of good men like Ethan's father, Victoria's father interjected, his tone slightly sharp. He had always valued hard work over inherited wealth, even if he had arranged his daughter's marriage to secure the family's future. An awkward silence fell over the group. Victoria, unable to help herself, looked up at Ethan and found him watching her with those penetrating eyes. "Congratulations on your upcoming wedding," Ethan said, his gaze shifting to Benjamin. "You are a lucky man." "Yes, I am," Benjamin agreed, his hand settling on Victoria's shoulder in a gesture that was clearly meant to establish ownership. "Victoria will make an excellent wife. She has been well trained in all the domestic arts, and she comes from good breeding stock." Victoria felt her cheeks burn with humiliation. He spoke of her as if she were a horse being shown at auction. She saw Ethan's jaw tighten, a muscle jumping beneath the skin. "I am sure Miss Thompson has many qualities beyond those that can be trained or inherited," Ethan said quietly. "Intelligence, kindness, spirit, those are the things that make a good partner." "Indeed," Benjamin said, but his tone suggested he thought such qualities were secondary at best. "Well, we should finish our lunch. Good to meet you, Vance." He steered Victoria back to their seats, his grip on her arm just a touch too tight. As they sat down, she glanced back and saw Ethan still standing there, his expression unreadable but his eyes filled with something that looked like regret. The rest of the social passed in a blur. Victoria smiled and nodded as various community members approached to congratulate her on her engagement, to discuss wedding details, to tell her how lucky she was. All the while, she was painfully aware of Ethan's presence, of the way he moved through the crowd with quiet dignity, speaking with ranchers and townspeople with an easy respect that Benjamin would never achieve despite all his wealth. As the afternoon wore on, she found herself near the edge of the gathering, taking a moment to breathe away from the constant attention. She stood beneath a large cottonwood tree, looking out at the valley stretching beyond the churchyard, when she heard footsteps behind her. "Beautiful country," Ethan's voice said softly. She turned to find him standing a respectful distance away, his hands in his pockets. "Yes, it is," she replied, her heart suddenly racing. "Are you happy, Miss Thompson?" The question caught her off guard. No one had asked her that, not once in all the months of wedding planning. "I am doing what is expected of me," she said carefully. "That is not what I asked." She met his eyes and saw genuine concern there, genuine interest. "Why do you care?" "Because I saw your face during that conversation earlier. Because I have seen enough of the world to know that money and position do not make a good marriage. Because from the moment I saw you standing outside that store, I have not been able to stop thinking about you." Victoria's breath caught. "Mr. Vance, you should not say such things. I am engaged." "I know. And if you love him, if you are truly happy with this choice, then I will never speak of this again. But if you are being forced into this, if your heart wants something different, then you should know that there are other options." "Other options?" She almost laughed at the absurdity of it. "I am promised to another. My father has given his word. The entire community is expecting this wedding." "There are no other options." "There are always options," Ethan said quietly. "You could choose to follow your heart instead of following expectations." "And what would that accomplish? Scandal, disgrace. My family would never forgive me, maybe. Or maybe they would come to understand that a loveless marriage is worse than any scandal." He took a step closer, his voice dropping. "I know we barely know each other, Miss Thompson. I know I have no right to say any of this. But I also know that what I felt when I first saw you, what I feel right now standing here with you, that does not come along very often. And I think, maybe, you feel it too." She wanted to deny it, to tell him he was being ridiculous, to walk away and pretend this conversation had never happened. But she could not make herself lie. "What I feel does not matter," she whispered. "My path is set." "Only if that is what your heart wants," Ethan said, his eyes searching hers. "But if your heart wants something else, if your heart wants someone else, then you owe it to yourself to at least consider it. You deserve to be loved, truly loved, not just valued for your breeding and domestic skills." "Victoria," her mother's voice called from across the yard, "it is time to go." Victoria jerked back, suddenly aware of how close they had been standing, of how this must look to anyone who might have noticed. "I have to go," she said quickly. "Think about what I said," Ethan replied. "And know that if you ever need anything, if you ever want to talk, I will be at the Crawford place. The offer I made still stands, only if that is what your heart wants." She hurried away without responding, her mind spinning, her heart pounding so hard she thought everyone must be able to hear it. As she climbed into the buggy beside her mother, she could not help but glance back one more time. Ethan stood beneath the cottonwood tree, watching her leave, and the look on his face was one of such longing that it made her chest ache. The next 2 weeks passed in a strange fog. Victoria went through the motions of wedding preparation, sitting for final dress fittings, reviewing menus with her mother, accepting gifts from neighbors and family friends. But every night, she lay awake thinking about what Ethan had said, about the possibility of a different life, about what it might mean to choose her own happiness over duty and expectation. She saw Ethan twice more during that time. Once when he came to the ranch to discuss buying some breeding stock from her father, and once when she rode past the Crawford place and saw him working on repairs to the fence line. Both times their eyes met and held, and both times she felt that same jolt of connection, that sense of recognition that went beyond logic or reason. But she said nothing. She did nothing. Because what could she do? Break her father's word? Humiliate Benjamin and his family? Become the subject of gossip and scandal in a community where reputation was everything? The thought was impossible. 1 week before the wedding, everything changed. Victoria had ridden out alone to check on a section of fence that her father was worried about. It was something she did often, enjoying the solitude and freedom of being on horseback in the open country. She was examining a loose post when she heard riders approaching fast. 3 men crested the ridge, riding hard. They pulled up short when they saw her, and she immediately knew they were trouble. They had the look of drifters, hard men with cold eyes and guns riding low on their hips. "Well now," the leader said, a tall man with a scar running down his left cheek. "What do we have here?" "Pretty young thing all alone." Victoria's heart raced, but she kept her voice steady. "This is Thompson land. You are trespassing." The man laughed. "Hear that, boys? We are trespassing." He dismounted and walked toward her. "Why do not you come with us, sweetheart? We could use some company." She backed toward her horse, but one of the other men cut her off. "I do not think so," he said. "My father will come looking for me," she said, trying to keep the fear out of her voice. "He knows where I went." "We will be long gone by then," the scarred man said, reaching for her arm. A gunshot split the air, kicking up dirt inches from the man's feet. Everyone froze. "The lady said this is Thompson land," Ethan's voice called out. Victoria turned to see him sitting on his paint horse about 30 yards away, a rifle in his hands. "That means you are not welcome here." The scarred man's hand moved toward his gun, but Ethan levered another round into his rifle with a smooth, practiced motion. "I would not," he said calmly. "I am a fair shot, and at this distance I will not miss." For a long moment no one moved. Then the scarred man raised his hand slowly. "No trouble, friend. We were just passing through." "Then keep passing," Ethan said. "And if I see you on this property again, I will not bother with warning shots." The men exchanged glances, then remounted their horses. The scarred man gave Victoria one last look that made her skin crawl. "See you around, sweetheart." "You will not," Ethan said coldly, and there was something in his voice that made the man's bravado falter. They rode off, heading south toward the Oregon-Nevada border. As soon as they were out of sight, Victoria's legs gave out and she sat down hard on the ground, trembling. Ethan was off his horse and beside her in an instant. "Are you hurt?" he asked, his hands gently checking her arms, her face. "Did they touch you?" "No," she managed. "You got here in time." "Thank God," he breathed. "I was checking fence line and heard voices when I realized it was you and those men." He stopped, his jaw clenching. "I should get you home." "How did you know?" she asked as he helped her to her feet. "How did you know it was me?" "I know your horse," he said simply. I have watched you ride past the Crawford place enough times to recognize that bay gelding." She looked up at him, at the concern and care in his eyes, and something inside her shifted irrevocably. This man, who barely knew her, had come running when he heard her voice, had been willing to face down 3 armed men to protect her. Benjamin, whom she was supposed to marry in 7 days, had never shown her even a fraction of this kind of genuine care. "Ethan," she whispered. "Victoria." The way he said her name, soft and reverent, made her heart ache. "What if I want what my heart wants?" The words tumbled out before she could stop them. "What if I do not want to marry Benjamin? What if I want something different?" His eyes widened, hope and something deeper flaring in their depths. "Then you tell me what you want, and I will help you make it happen, whatever it takes." "I want to be free," she said, the truth of it finally breaking through all the layers of duty and expectation. "I want to make my own choices. I want to marry someone who sees me as a person, not a possession. I want love." "You have it," Ethan said fiercely. "You have had it from the moment I saw you. I love you, Victoria Thompson. I know it is fast and probably foolish, but it is true. And if you will have me, if you will give me the chance, I will spend every day for the rest of my life proving that you made the right choice." Tears spilled down her cheeks. "My father will be furious. Benjamin's family will demand satisfaction. The whole town will talk." "Let them talk," Ethan said, cupping her face in his hands. "Let them say what they want. All that matters is what is in here." He placed his hand over her heart. "What does your heart want, Victoria?" "You," she breathed. "My heart wants you." He kissed her then, soft and gentle, a promise of all the tenderness and passion that could exist between 2 people who truly loved each other. It was nothing like the chaste, cold kisses Benjamin had given her during their courtship. This was real, alive, electric. When they finally pulled apart, Ethan rested his forehead against hers. "We need to talk to your father, today. The longer we wait, the harder it will be." Victoria nodded, though her stomach twisted with anxiety. "He is going to be so angry, I know, but he is also a good man who loves you. And I think, deep down, he knows that Benjamin is not right for you." They rode back to the ranch together, not touching but so attuned to each other's presence that it felt like they were connected by an invisible thread. As they approached the house, Victoria saw her father in the yard talking with one of the ranch hands. When he saw them riding together, his expression shifted to confusion and then concern. "Victoria, what happened?" he asked, striding toward them. "You look pale." "There were men on the property," Ethan explained as they dismounted. "3 drifters who were bothering your daughter. I convinced them to leave." Her father's face darkened. "Were you hurt?" "No, father. Ethan arrived before anything happened." "Thank God for that." He clasped Ethan's shoulder. "I owe you a debt, son." "Actually, sir, there is something we need to discuss," Ethan said, his voice steady despite the gravity of the moment. "It concerns your daughter and her upcoming wedding." Her father's eyes narrowed. "What about it?" Victoria stepped forward, gathering all her courage. "Father, I cannot marry Benjamin. I do not love him. I'm not even sure I like him. And I know you arranged this marriage for the good of the family, but I am asking you to release me from it." "Victoria," her father said, shock and anger warring in his voice. "Do you understand what you are saying? Do you understand what breaking this engagement would mean? The scandal, the damage to our family's reputation." "I do," she said, her voice shaking but firm. "But I also understand what it would mean to spend the rest of my life married to a man who sees me as property, who does not care about my thoughts or feelings. Father, you taught me to value hard work and integrity. You showed me what it means to build something meaningful. How can I do that in a marriage where I am nothing more than an ornament?" Her father opened his mouth to respond, then closed it, looking suddenly older. And I suppose this has something to do with Mr. Vance here. I love her, sir, Ethan said without hesitation. I know we have not known each other long, but I love her, and I can give her a good life. Maybe not as wealthy as what Benjamin could offer, but honest and filled with respect and partnership. I would never treat her as anything less than my equal. You are asking me to let my daughter marry a man with no established ranch, no significant holdings, no security, her father said, but there was less anger in his voice now and more weariness. I am asking you to let your daughter marry a man who loves her, Ethan replied. Who will work himself to the bone to provide for her. Who will honor her and cherish her every day of their lives together. I cannot promise wealth, Mr. Thompson, but I can promise that she will be happy. Her father looked between them, seeing the way they stood close, the way their hands had found each other without conscious thought. He sighed deeply. Your mother is going to have my hide for this. Father, Victoria breathed, hope flaring in her chest. I want you to be happy, Victoria. That has always been what I wanted, even if I lost sight of it in trying to secure your future. He rubbed his face. But you need to understand, breaking this engagement will have consequences. Benjamin's father will be furious. There may be financial repercussions. And the talk. We understand, Victoria said, and we are prepared to face it. Are you? Her father looked at her intently. Are you prepared to possibly be shunned by people you have known your whole life, to have doors closed to you, to start your married life under a cloud of scandal? If it means I get to spend that life with Ethan, then yes, she said firmly. Her father studied them both for a long moment, then nodded slowly. All right, but I am coming with you when you tell Benjamin and his father this is not going to be pleasant. He was right. The conversation at the Caldwell ranch later that afternoon was one of the worst experiences of Victoria's life. Benjamin alternated between cold fury and wounded pride. His father threatened legal action and social ruin, and his mother wept dramatic tears about the humiliation. But through it all, Ethan stood solid and steady beside Victoria, his presence a reminder that she was making the right choice. You are making a mistake, Benjamin said coldly as they prepared to leave. You think you love him now, but when you are living in poverty, when you see what you gave up, you will regret this. The only thing I regret, Victoria replied, finding a strength she had not known she possessed, is that I ever agreed to marry you in the first place. I deserve better than to be valued for my breeding and domestic skills. I deserve to be loved. Benjamin's face flushed red. You will be sorry. Actually, Victoria said quietly, I think for the first time in a long time I am going to be happy. As they rode away from the Caldwell ranch, Victoria felt a weight lift from her shoulders. There would be difficulties ahead, she knew. Her mother was indeed furious, and several prominent families in the community made their disapproval clear. But there were also unexpected allies. Several of the ranch wives privately told Victoria they admired her courage. Her father's foreman said any man who would face down 3 armed drifters for a woman was worth his salt. And slowly, the scandal began to die down. Ethan bought the Crawford place and immediately set about making improvements. Victoria spent every spare moment there, helping him repair the house, plan the ranch layout, dreaming about their future together. They were married 6 weeks after she broke her engagement, in a small ceremony at the Thompson ranch with just immediate family and close friends present. It was not the grand wedding that had been planned with Benjamin, but it was infinitely better. Victoria wore a simple white dress, and Ethan wore his best suit, and when the traveling minister pronounced them husband and wife, the kiss they shared was full of joy and promise and love. Their first year of marriage was hard work. Ranching was always hard work, but building something from scratch required long days and constant effort. Victoria learned to brand cattle, to mend fences, to cook meals on a wood stove in the drafty old house. Her hands, once soft and pampered, became calloused and strong. But she had never been happier. Ethan was everything Benjamin had not been. He consulted her on ranch decisions, valued her opinions, and treated her as a true partner. They worked side by side during the day and fell into each other's arms at night, their passion growing deeper with time. He made her laugh, challenged her thinking, and loved her with a fierce devotion that still sometimes took her breath away. The community gradually accepted their marriage. It helped that Ethan proved to be an excellent rancher, his cattle thriving under his careful management. Her father, who had initially been uncertain about the match, became one of Ethan's staunchest supporters, often remarking that he wished he had seen what a good man Ethan was before arranging Victoria's engagement to Benjamin. Benjamin himself married less than a year later, a young woman from a wealthy family in Idaho. Victoria heard through town gossip that the marriage was as cold and formal as theirs would have been, a business arrangement rather than a love match. She felt sorry for Benjamin's wife, but could not regret her own choice. 2 years after their wedding, Victoria discovered she was pregnant. The news filled them both with joy and terror in equal measure. The nearest doctor was a day's ride away, and childbirth on the frontier was always dangerous. But Victoria had the support of experienced ranch wives and her own mother, who had softened considerably toward Ethan after seeing how happy her daughter was. When their son was born on a snowy December night in 1881, Ethan held the tiny boy with shaking hands and tears streaming down his face. "He is perfect," he whispered. "You are perfect. I love you so much." They named him James Robert Vance after Ethan's father and Victoria's father. Little James was a healthy, loud baby who seemed determined to never sleep. But watching Ethan with their son, seeing the gentleness and love with which he cared for the baby, Victoria fell even more deeply in love with her husband. The years that followed brought more children. A daughter, Sarah, born 2 years after James. Then twin boys, Michael and Thomas, whose arrival caused chaos and joy in equal measure. Each pregnancy was a risk, each birth a triumph. And through it all, Ethan was there, steady and loving, a devoted father and husband. The ranch prospered. Ethan's careful breeding program produced some of the finest cattle in eastern Oregon, and buyers came from as far as Portland to purchase his stock. They were able to expand their holdings, buying adjacent property and building a new, larger house with proper bedrooms for each of the children and modern conveniences that made Victoria's work easier. But success and wealth did not change the fundamental nature of their relationship. They were still partners, still best friends as well as lovers. Every evening after the children were in bed, they sat together on the porch and talked about their day, sharing dreams and concerns, making plans for the future. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Ethan took Victoria into town for dinner at the hotel restaurant, a rare luxury that required arranging childcare with her parents. As they sat across from each other, older now, worn by years of hard work but happy, he reached across the table and took her hand. "Do you ever regret it?" he asked. "Giving up what you could have had with Benjamin," Victoria laughed. "Not for a single moment. That life would have been comfortable but empty. This life, our life, is real. It is full of love and meaning and joy." Even with 4 wild children and a drafty old ranch house, especially with 4 wild children and a once drafty, now rather nice ranch house, she corrected with a smile. "Ethan, you gave me something I did not even know I could have. You gave me freedom and choice and love. You saw me as a person, not a possession. That is worth more than all of Benjamin's wealth combined. You saved me too, he said quietly. "I was drifting before I met you, moving from place to place, never putting down roots. You gave me a reason to build something permanent, to create a home and a family. You gave my life purpose." "We gave each other everything," Victoria said, squeezing his hand. "And I would make the same choice 1,000 times over. You are my heart, Ethan Vance. You always will be." They kissed across the table, not caring who saw, still as in love as they had been that first day when their eyes met on a dusty street in Jordan Valley. The years continued to pass, marked by the rhythms of ranch life and the milestones of their children's growth. James grew into a strong, serious boy who loved working with his father and showed early promise as a rancher. Sarah was bright and curious, always asking questions and reading every book she could get her hands on. The twins were wild and adventurous, keeping everyone on their toes with their schemes and pranks. When Victoria was 35, she discovered she was pregnant once more, a surprise that both delighted and worried her. She was older now, and pregnancies at her age carried more risk. But she was also strong and healthy from years of ranch work, and she had the best care available in the form of a new doctor who had recently settled in Jordan Valley. Their youngest child, a daughter they named Grace, was born healthy and perfect in the spring of 1891. She had her mother's auburn hair and her father's hazel eyes, and from the moment she entered the world, she was adored by her entire family. Ethan, now 40 years old, looked at his wife and 5 children gathered in their comfortable home, at the prosperous ranch spread out around them, and marveled at how his life had turned out. He thought back to that moment when he first saw Victoria outside the general store, to the instant certainty he had felt that she was meant to be his. Following that instinct, fighting for that love, had been the best decision of his life. Victoria's father passed away peacefully in 1895 at the age of 68, surrounded by his family. In his final hours, he called Ethan to his bedside. "I want you to know," he said, his voice weak but clear, "that I could not have asked for a better son-in-law. You made my daughter happier than I ever could have with the match I arranged. Thank you for having the courage to fight for her." "Thank you for trusting us, sir," Ethan replied, his throat tight with emotion. "Thank you for letting her choose her own path." "She chose well," her father whispered. "You both did." The children grew. James, at 18, was already managing much of the ranch operation alongside his father. Sarah, at 16, announced her intention to become a teacher, a decision that filled Victoria with pride. The twins, at 14, were finally settling down from their wildest years. And Grace, at 8, was showing signs of inheriting both her mother's determination and her father's quiet strength. Victoria and Ethan, now in their early 40s, often reflected on the path their lives had taken. The scandal that had seemed so catastrophic 30 years ago was long forgotten, replaced by respect for what they had built together. Their ranch was known throughout Oregon for the quality of its stock and the integrity of its owners. Their children were healthy and happy, growing into fine young people. And their love, tested by time and hardship and the everyday challenges of life, had only grown stronger. One evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of gold and crimson, Victoria leaned against Ethan's shoulder. "You remember what you said to me that day at the church social?" she asked. "When you told me I should choose what my heart wanted." "Of course," he replied, his arm tightening around her. "It was the most terrifying thing I have ever done, telling you that. I thought you would never speak to me again." "It was the most terrifying thing anyone had ever said to me," she admitted. "But it was also the most freeing. You gave me permission to want something different, to believe that I deserved love and happiness. That changed everything." Your heart wanted me, Ethan said softly, still amazed by that fact even after all these years. My heart chose you, Victoria corrected. And it still chooses you, every single day. When I wake up beside you, when I watch you with our children, when I work alongside you on this ranch we built together, my heart chooses you, over and over again. And mine chooses you, he said, turning to kiss her temple. Always and forever. They sat in comfortable silence as the sun sank below the horizon, painting their world in the soft purple light of twilight. Inside the house, they could hear the sounds of their family Sarah practicing a lesson plan, the twins arguing good-naturedly about something, Grace singing as she played with her dolls. James would be checking the stock one final time before bed, a responsibility he took seriously. This was the life they had built, not through wealth or status or following expected paths, but through love and courage and the willingness to choose their own happiness. It had not always been easy. There had been hard times, lean years when the cattle market was poor, illnesses that frightened them, and the normal struggles of raising 5 children. But they had faced it all together, partners in every sense of the word. As the stars began to emerge in the darkening sky, Ethan stood and offered his hand to Victoria. "Come on, Mrs. Vance, let us go inside." She took his hand, marveling as always at the spark that still jumped between them at the simplest touch. "I love you, Ethan Vance." "I love you too, Victoria Vance," he replied, using her married name with the same pride and affection he had on their wedding day. Forever. They walked inside together, hand in hand, ready to face whatever tomorrow brought, secure in the knowledge that they had found something rare and precious, true love, freely chosen and faithfully kept. In 1898, when Victoria turned 48 and Ethan was 53, they celebrated their 20th wedding anniversary with a large party at the ranch. All 5 of their children were there. Along with grandchildren, James had married a lovely woman named Catherine and given them 2 grandsons. Friends and neighbors from all over the valley attended, testimony to the respect and affection the couple had earned over the years. As Victoria looked around at the celebration, at the people who filled their home with laughter and love, she thought back to that young woman standing outside a general store, resigned to a loveless marriage and a life of duty without joy. If she could speak to that young woman now, what would she say? She would tell her to be brave, to trust her heart, to know that the best things in life often require courage and risk. She would tell her that love, real, true, deep love, was worth fighting for, worth every moment of scandal and hardship that might follow. But most of all, she would tell her that the cowboy who rode into town on a dusty paint horse, the one who looked at her with those quiet, penetrating eyes and asked what her heart wanted, he was worth choosing. Every single time. "What are you thinking about?" Ethan asked, appearing beside her with 2 glasses of punch. "About us," she said, accepting the glass. "About how far we have come. Any regrets?" She looked up at him, at the silver threading through his dark hair, at the lines around his eyes carved by years of sun and laughter, at the same steady strength that had first drawn her to him. "Not a single one. You." "Only that I did not meet you sooner," he said, echoing the same thing he told her every year on their anniversary. "Then we would have been younger but not ready for each other," she replied, giving the same answer she always did. It was their ritual, a reminder of the miracle of their timing, of being the right people at exactly the right moment. Their oldest son, James, stood up to give a toast. "To my parents," he said, his voice carrying across the room, "who taught us that love is a choice you make every day, that hard work builds character, and that family is the most important thing in the world. Thank you for showing us what a true partnership looks like." "To Victoria and Ethan," the crowd echoed, raising their glasses. As they toasted and drank and celebrated, Victoria felt Ethan's hand find hers under the table. 20 years, 5 children, countless challenges overcome. And still, that same spark, that same connection that had blazed to life the first time they saw each other. The party continued late into the night. When the last guest finally left and the children had all gone to their respective homes or rooms, Victoria and Ethan stood in the doorway of their house, looking out at their land under the light of a full moon. 20 more years. Ethan asked, his arm around her waist. "At least," Victoria replied. "We have grandchildren to spoil and a ranch to run and a whole life still ahead of us." "I plan to love you through every moment of it," he promised. "I know you will," she said, turning in his arms to kiss him. "Because that is what your heart wants." "That is what my heart wants," he agreed, "now and always." They went inside, closing the door on the cool night air, secure in their love and the life they had built together. The choice Victoria had made 20 years ago, to follow her heart instead of following expectations, had led to more happiness than she could have ever imagined. And every day, she chose it again. Every day, she chose love. The turn of the century brought changes to Jordan Valley and to the Vance Ranch. The old frontier was disappearing, replaced by more settled communities, better roads, and modern conveniences. But some things remained constant: the land, the work, and the love that anchored the Vance family. In 1903, Sarah married a young teacher from Portland and moved to the city, though she visited often with her husband and young daughter. The twins, now 22, had grown into fine young men. Michael showed a talent for horse breeding and was developing a program that brought buyers from across the West. Thomas had surprised everyone by going to agricultural college and returning with new ideas about scientific ranching that complemented Ethan's practical experience. Grace, at 17, was the image of her mother at that age, beautiful and spirited and intelligent. She had several young men courting her, but she showed no interest in marrying young as her mother had been expected to do. "I want to see something of the world first," she told her parents one evening. "I want to make my own choices, just like you taught me, Mama." Victoria smiled, recognizing her own rebellious spirit in her youngest daughter. "Just remember that the best choice you can make is to follow your heart, wherever that leads you." "Even if it leads me away from here?" Grace asked hesitantly. "Even then," Victoria assured her. "Your father and I want you to be happy, not just settled. There is a difference." Ethan, now 58 but still strong and vital from a lifetime of ranch work, nodded his agreement. "You have your whole life ahead of you, Grace. Take your time figuring out what you want. We will be here when you need us." It was this same wisdom and love that had guided all their children, giving them the confidence to make their own choices while knowing they had a solid foundation to return to. As Victoria approached her mid-50s, she remained active in ranch life, though she let the younger generation take on more of the heavy physical labor. She found joy in her grandchildren, in her garden, in the community work she did helping new families settle in the area. And she found the deepest joy in the quiet evenings with Ethan, when they could sit together and simply be, comfortable in a silence built on years of shared experience. "You ever think about what would have happened if you had married Benjamin?" Ethan asked one evening, a question he had never posed before. Victoria considered it seriously. "I think I would have had a comfortable life. Nice things, social standing, security, but I do not think I would have ever truly lived. I would have been an ornament, a showpiece, not a real person with thoughts and dreams and choices. I would have raised children, but I do not think I would have known them the way I know ours." "Does that make sense?" "Perfect sense," Ethan said. "I think about what would have happened if I had not come to Jordan Valley that autumn, if I had gone somewhere else instead. I would have been alone, building something but never understanding why. You gave me purpose, Victoria. You gave me a reason to create something lasting." "We gave each other everything," she said, as she had said so many times before. "We built this life together, and it is a good life. A real life." In 1905, tragedy struck when Sarah's husband died suddenly of pneumonia, leaving her widowed with 2 young children. She returned to the ranch, heartbroken and lost, and her parents took her and the children in without question. Victoria held her weeping daughter through long nights, remembering what it felt like to face an uncertain future, though the circumstances were different. "You are strong," she told Sarah. "You come from strong women. Your grandmother made a life on the frontier when she could have stayed in the East. I made a choice that scandalized the community. You will find your way through this." "How?" Sarah asked. "I loved him so much." "You love him still," Victoria corrected gently. "Love does not end with death, but you are young and you have children to raise. You will survive this. And someday when you are ready, you will live again, truly live." Sarah's grief was a reminder that life held sorrows as well as joys, but having family, having love, made those sorrows bearable. The Vance home became fuller and louder with Sarah's children added to the mix, and slowly, over months and years, Sarah healed. She began teaching at the local school, finding purpose in shaping young minds, and though she never remarried, she built a meaningful life for herself and her children. Ethan turned 60 in 1908, and the family held a large celebration. All 5 of his children were there, along with 8 grandchildren ranging in age from infant to teenage. As he looked around at the family gathered in his honor, at the ranch that had grown from a broken-down homestead into a thriving operation, he felt overwhelmed with gratitude. "I am a lucky man," he told Victoria that night. "We are both lucky," she replied. "Lucky we found each other. Lucky we had the courage to choose love. Lucky that we have built all of this together." She gestured to encompass not just the physical ranch, but everything it represented: the family, the love, the life they had created. "The best decision I ever made was asking you what your heart wanted," Ethan said, pulling her close. "The best decision I ever made was telling you the truth," Victoria replied. "That my heart wanted you." They stood together in the gathering dusk, still as connected as they had been 30 years ago, still choosing each other every day. The years continued their steady march. Grace eventually married a lawyer from Portland and moved to the city, though she visited often. Michael married and brought his wife to live at the ranch, taking over more of the daily operations as Ethan gradually stepped back. Thomas married a woman from Idaho and started his own ranch nearby, using the scientific methods he had learned in college. James's children grew and started families of their own. In 1912, Ethan and Victoria celebrated their 30th wedding anniversary. They were both in their early 60s now, their hair silver, their faces lined with the marks of a life well lived. But they moved with the vigor of people who had stayed active, and their eyes still sparkled with love when they looked at each other. For this anniversary, they did something different. They rode out to the spot where Ethan had saved Victoria from the drifters all those years ago, the place where she had first admitted that her heart wanted something different, wanted him. "This is where everything changed," Victoria said, looking around at the familiar landscape. "This is where I found my courage." "You always had courage," Ethan corrected. "This is just where you decided to use it." "Because of you," she said. "Because you asked me the question no one else had ever asked. Because you cared what I wanted, not what was expected of me. I asked because I had to know, Ethan said. Because from the first moment I saw you, I knew. I knew you were meant to be mine, that we were meant to build a life together. I just had to trust that you would feel it too. I did, Victoria said. I felt it immediately. It terrified me. But you chose it anyway. You chose us. Best choice I ever made, she said, echoing words she had spoken countless times over the years, words that never stopped being true. They sat there for a long while, holding hands, remembering everything they had been through together. The scandal of the broken engagement, the hard early years building the ranch, the joy of each child's birth, the sorrows and losses that were inevitable in any life. The laughter and love and simple daily moments that made up a marriage. 30 years, Ethan said wonderingly. It went so fast. And yet I remember every moment, Victoria replied. Every conversation, every touch, every time you looked at me like I was the most precious thing in your world. You are, he said simply. You always have been. As they rode back to the ranch, side by side as they had ridden through life, Victoria thought about that young woman she had been, promised to a man she did not love, resigned to a life that would have slowly suffocated her spirit. She thought about the courage it had taken to break free, to follow her heart, to choose love over duty. And she thought about the man who had given her that choice, who had seen her not as property or an ornament, but as a person deserving of love and respect and partnership. Ethan Vance had been her salvation, but she had been his too. They had saved each other, built a life together that was richer than anything either could have achieved alone. The ranch house came into view, solid and welcoming, lights glowing in the windows. Their children and grandchildren were there, preparing a surprise party for the anniversary. Victoria and Ethan exchanged knowing glances. They had been around long enough to recognize the signs of a surprise party. But they rode on, ready to act surprised and delighted, ready to celebrate with the family they had created, the legacy they had built. Because all of this had started with a simple question and an honest answer. "What does your heart want?" he had asked. "You," she had answered. And she had been choosing him ever since, every day, every moment, every heartbeat, just as he had been choosing her. They dismounted at the barn, and Ethan took both horses to unsaddle while Victoria waited. When he returned, he offered his arm, and together they walked to the house, ready to face whatever celebration awaited them, ready to face whatever years remained, ready to face it all together. Because that was what their hearts wanted. That was what their hearts would always want. And for Victoria and Ethan Vance, following their hearts had led to more joy, more love, and more life than they could have ever imagined possible. Inside the house, their family waited, ready to celebrate 30 years of a love that had started with a chance meeting and a cowboy brave enough to ask what a woman's heart truly wanted. It was a love that had overcome scandal and struggle, that had built a legacy that would endure for generations. It was a love that proved, beyond any doubt, that choosing your heart was always the right choice. Always.